All right. We're underway. This is the first episode officially of the Temple podcast, which we are doing together. And I'm really excited about this because we're also going to be doing episodes individually with our own guests that we want to reach out to. So we're going to kind of have a dual lane during this podcast, and the foundation of it is going to be us together. And this kind of sets the basis for our theme of really our entire message together and what we're uncovering and the theme of the first episode. But first, I just want to start with the structure and kind of setting a foundation for that we're going to do for each episode. And so for this first one, we are recording on Monday, which is the day of the moon. And the moon exists in the emotional body. So the consciousness, the name, the frequency that I connect with the consciousness of the moon is Chandra. And so Chandra is the consciousness of all moons. She's not just one body, but she is the consciousness that manifests as all moons. And so when you tune into her, when you work with her, you can work with the emotional spectrum. The emotional body is known as the lower mental body. So it's holding the layer of the lower vibrational emotions. And yeah, she's going to be with us throughout all today. And it's really about understanding sacred union and what sacred union is. And that's what feels like the structure of this podcast, and what we're going to do with this really is centered around is us being the foundation of it in the center, and then us individually being able to do our own thing. So before I set the space with a prayer, would you like to give an intro?
This is mainly to also share, I feel, with other people what goes on behind the scenes. A lot of the time you see us online, you see us sharing our work, you see us talking about the stuff that we are knowledgeable about, but there's also a lot of stuff that's very relatable to people. And that's why I personally have always enjoyed hosting podcasts, because it is a space where you can just relate to other people, and where people can hear you speak from just a very relatable point of view. So my intention for this podcast is that you may recognize yourself in what we share, or that there's gonna be like little gems in it for you that are then going to be seeds that you can plant in your life.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's the biggest intention, I think, with sacred union itself, and being devoted into this type of relationship is being able to share that transparency and that vulnerability and just allow others to receive it. And that's what we're going to get into. But first, we're going to set a space with a Pleiadian prayer. And you can just receive these words or imagine yourself speaking these words. We're just going to connect into this frequency. And it is, may we know peace. May we know love. May we know ourselves in gratitude of the gifts of the kingdom that are bestowed upon us now. May we know joy. May we know prosperity. May we know our brother as ourself, our sister as ourself. May we see things as they truly are, and not as how we've been instructed to see them. May we know God in the air, in the earth, in the water, in the fire, in the ether, in the other, throughout all time and in all space, We offer ourselves to God in this agreement. Behold, we make all things new. All right. Let's do it.
Let's dive into it. Sacred union.
Trinity. That's been the theme that's been coming up. Is Trinity. So you start. What does that mean to you?
It means that if there's in any interaction that you have, whether that is with your dog, with your neighbor, with your child, friends, or person that you're in a romantic connection with, that you are never just in a connection with them. When you bring consciousness into it, there is always God in the center. And if you are here, and this person is here, and God is this light beam that is constantly there, then you're connecting both to the highest version of the other through God in the middle. That is what it means to me.
So I just said the word kingdom in that prayer. How do you think that applies to this?
In Aramaic, the word for the kingdom of heaven is Malkuta Shemaya, but we're not going to get into the whole linguistics of it. It's actually the queendom, but it means in your body. So you can find God in your body. By simply breathing and setting intention, you can connect with the God within you. And if you're connected with the God within you, then you can only see other people through the lens of God. Then it is going to become very difficult for you to see them as anything else than that is not connected to God when you're first going through this God filter that lives inside of you.
And that's what I think is one of the main hiccups in partnership, is being pushed to one side of the energy spectrum, meaning more of the masculine understanding and the conditioning that's been put in place. And so even when there are souls attempting to find ascension through partnership, I'm still really seeing them like polarize into the patriarchy perspective and like assuming the roles of the same things that we've been conditioned around, but in kind of just with like a new age filter.
And in a lot of these sacred union teachings, twin flame teachings that you find online, they are all being brought through a filter of relationship counseling. And they are not being brought through a filter of this is your connection to God first. And if that's the way they would be, the goal is usually like, how can you make this relationship better? How can you get this other person to basically commit to this connection? But you cannot change another person. You have no control over another person. So it's all very external. The focus is often on how can we get this other person to do the thing that we need them to do. But why do you need them to do something if that may not be in alignment with what is your highest timeline and that person's highest timeline? If more of these teachings would be focused on how can you manifest into your life the person that is going to meet you there where you are meeting with God, then it doesn't matter who that is, because you are already in the first and most primary, most important connection that you should be focusing on, which is your connection to your highest self, to the God frequency that is your celestial home, that is living inside of you, that you are supposed to draw down into your body to then manifest on this earth your best timeline. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And what do you want to show them the card? Do you still have it out that you pulled before the reading?
I had it.
Did you put it away?
I had it.
Did we lose it?
Maybe you're sitting on
I
it.
might be sitting on it.
Yeah.
Oh, here it is.
Oh.
We got it right here. So I think it shows up the correct way when I put it on these cameras. I always think it's going to be backwards, but it is taking your power back. And so this is Archangel, how do you say that? Raziel?
Yeah.
Use your God-given power and intention to manifest blessings in your life. And so I feel like that's directly related to what she is just describing in the power dynamics of relationship and of partnership, and the way we try and control so many things, but in trying to control them, we're giving our power away continuously. And that power dynamic is always coming from the sense of polarity, a sense of push and pull, a sense of one and the other. And there is a raising of consciousness within that. You know, we're about to talk about our own journeys through twin flame to twin ray, or to these, I've heard kingdom spouse, which is another term that I really like.
Never heard of that before.
I like that one. And it's around the same thing. It's the trinity of it versus the polarity of it. And there has to be integration of polarity in order to embody the trinity aspect. And we have to embody and integrate all of the polarity identities. But we're starting to see this theme with twin flames and with spiritual partnerships, where people are feeling this push and pull, and they're in this power dynamic where there's competition driving the entire basis of the relationship. And you can think of polarity as competition. It's like there has to be a negative and a positive charge that's in competition with itself. That's creating different points of friction and different ways of pulling and creating tension, and then coming together to alchemize and synthesize that tension. So there has to be polarity as one factor within all experiences of consciousness. But assuming that that polarity is the end all be all, and I don't mean, because it gets confusing here, because people know we're going to oneness, we know we're going to unity, but it's like we're trying to strap that unity on from the lens of polarity. And we're still identifying with so many parts of our individual body, so much of just this personality, and that's what creates a sense of polarity, because then it's Rayan and Debra, it's the one and the other. And even if we're seeing unity, we understand the concept of unity, then we're still holding that from a sense of polarity. So within this push and pull, and within this repulsion and attraction, there's then a higher platform to be stood on, and a higher platform to be found, which is a higher vibrational platform. Again, we're not creating pedestals and superiority here, because that's what the sense of competition is doing. To whereas when you're integrating competition, you're integrating the polarity functions within your body, within your soul, within all of your field. And so that is then able to come into the relationship from a healthy standpoint, rather than it being something that's behind the radar, that's really driving the car of the entire participation in the partnership.
Mm-hmm. And about the hierarchy, because a lot of people, this is also how we've been conditioned just in this society. Hierarchy, rank, achievements. It starts with the school system. Oh, this relationship is not good. This relationship is good. This is a twin flame, so this is the good relationship. This is a karmic. This is not what you want. In the eyes of God, all relationships are sacred, because they were all made in the eyes of God. Even the traumatic soul connection. Even the ex-husband that you don't like. These relationships all serve a purpose. There is no hierarchy. That's like saying, oh, eggs and bananas and kiwis, you are better than this. No, they serve different purposes. You're not going to make spaghetti sauce with bananas and strawberries, okay? But that does not mean that those are not good foods.
I know, I'm joking.
So the thing is, all these are building blocks that you have carefully picked out before you incarnated into this lifetime to contribute to who you are. So all of these soul partners are a part of your plan. They are a part of who you have become right now in this moment. And that is why sometimes it's easy to kind of think, oh yeah, we need to get to this highest point of view. If you are just always trying to go back within, you are automatically going to attract to you those people that are a perfect frequency match for where you are in life. And if that in this now moment is another karmic partner, then it would be wrong to want to bypass that, because that person is going to have very important activations for you to get you to where you're going next, if we look at it in a linear way. And everything has already kind of, like, you already knew what you wanted to do. You knew what your plan was when you came into this life. So you knew that you were going to meet all these people, and you were sitting at this round table with all of them. A table with no head, or it was just a round table, and they were all there. So there was no hierarchy at this table of angelic beings where you are there with all your soul family. And I'm talking, hey, you're going to be the father of my child. You're going to be the one that I'm going to be with after I do all these things. And they're all together sitting at this round table as equals. Basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the surrender aspect. And the purpose for talking about this too and shedding light on it is to break down limitations and ceilings, because there's a flux of energy that if we're using a direction and ascension, it's going up in vibration. So there are those who are moving out of certain periods of their life and of their soul learning, and they need to understand that there is experiences past what there has previously been. But all of this said, I think back on all of my relationships. The last one that I was in, the long committed one, was the first spiritual partnership that I was in. To whereas all of the ones up until then, like, I see the push and pull, like the very deep trauma bond push and pull. And I wouldn't change any of that. I was moving through all of those relationships exactly when I needed to. And everything is about that trust and that surrender. And when you're incorporating these principles of the trinity and trust and surrender, then you're opening more potentials for your experience and for the relationship that you're currently in. And so this is always about becoming more present, becoming more confidence in your moment-to-moment decision-making and in your moment-to-moment just experience, and not trying to get out of it, not realizing if you think that you're trapped. All of these types of mentalities keep us stuck in those lower frames of mind.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because it is very easy to start thinking, oh, my ex-partner, this or that, or to basically see the whole relationship as bad or a bad experience. You want to forget all about them, but why? Why do you want to forget all about this entire big lesson that this relationship may have been for you? If you distance yourself from the person that you are, like in my case, Debra, I distance myself and I align with my highest self. And I look back in an objective way onto this connection that I had with this other person, any of my other people that I've been with in the past, like, then I would not identify with any emotions that I may have experienced in this relationship that have been unpleasant, because all emotions are teachers. We learn stuff, we integrate stuff if we're open to seeing it and not resisting the lessons and the initiations that these relationships have for us. And then we can be grateful for the beautiful moments, even with people that have been abusive towards me. And that is not the same as saying that I approve of their negative behavior that was damaging to me. But it is being fully in the now moment in every moment. And then being able to look at it from a higher point of view and seeing each moment as separate and seeing everything like this crystal has a side. This is a negative, this is a side that's not so pleasant. This was maybe a very pleasant side. And you can look at this experience and say, this is something that I enjoyed. This was an interaction that was positive. This is something that I'm taking with me for my future. For example, I definitely learned a lot of stuff from being with my previous partner that are now benefiting me greatly in this connection.
Yeah, so, absolutely. And that's that I wouldn't be able to hold this connection if I didn't go through those things in the way that I did and in the sequence that they happened. And with what you're saying too about the shadow or like the negative sides of things, like the more that you're working with the acceptance and the forgiveness of those things, then the more you're just inherently able to have a connection of gratitude and of forgiveness and of eventually joy for those moments when a lot of that negativity and that dense trauma has been cleared. And like, I'm thinking about the movies Inside Out right now, which I don't think, oh, you said you haven't seen the second one, right?
The first one.
You've seen the first one. Yeah. And it's like, I was trying to explain conflict to somebody and they were only understanding it as like an argument between people or like two people in a fight. But I was like, no, it's like, we're constantly in conflict. Like conflict is friction and conflict is harmonizing. And so there has to be basis of principles and practices to understand conflict in order to harmonize it. And that's what I think of like the internal state with all of the different emotions. And it's like these emotions are almost like in competition with themselves. And in those moments in time, in those memories, those emotions are still in competition because they're like trying to override which one's holding that moment. And so that then is creating competition in the partnership. And so that is creating like the triggering of the traumatic experiences and of the explosive anger or the shutting out or passive aggressiveness, or it's like all of that stuff that's lodged in there from the previous partnerships, from the previous relationships, that is creating like competition within like the dynamic of the relationship.
Mm-hmm. And it's almost like fine-tuning an instrument. For those of you that play instruments, you play guitar, you play violin. Imagine that a tuned violin would be the equivalent of tuning into the highest frequency for the connection to God, to Source. And this violin, if it has been abused or if it has been through some bullshit, it has been through some stuff, okay? You got it at Goodwill. I don't know. You found some beat up violin, okay? You get into a relationship with this violin. You're gonna try to play this violin and it sounds real bad. And it sounds like you wanna just plug your ears. You have to fine tune it. So that means this violin, you're going to start fine-tuning it. It's going to make all kinds of sounds, and gradually you're going to find the tune, and it's going to be tuned to this harmonic frequency. That is what it's like. This violin has its history. It's been tuned by other people. So it's coming into this union. I know this may be a weird example.
Not at all.
So that's what you are doing in each interaction with somebody. So conflict is basically two frequencies meeting and harmonizing, and that's not necessarily going to go smooth from the beginning. So yeah.
And that really has to do with the root chakra. And the root chakra, a principle of it is harmony through conflict. And so that's like, if you're not able to have a foundation of sturdiness with safety, then the conflict is going to have trouble harmonizing because you're going to hold on to it. You're not going to let it go. The root chakra is like the waste system. Like, you think of where we release waste, it's right at the root chakra. So we build this conflict up, and then we have to come together and feel the friction and then be able to release the waste together. And we just had a whole few hours dedicated to that earlier today, which was, we've been in this partnership for about 3 weeks total, right? Less, 2.5, 3 weeks. And everything was moving really fast, and we kind of realized that we hadn't sat down. Because of the things we've been through and the foundation we have, we're very open just throughout our days, and we're very vulnerable, and we talk about what's coming up. But we hadn't had a chance to really sit down and kind of really talk about like what this means coming together and set agreements and share anything that was coming up. And so I had a lot of stuff coming up around just residue, is what I call it, left over from my previous long-term relationship, which I was in it for about 6 years and married for about 1.5 years of that. I think it's about that. And so there was a lot of spiritual healing, but also a lot of stuff that was just still lodged in there. And it was causing me to kind of want to perceive the situation in certain ways around feeling hyper focused around her emotions and feeling responsible for her emotions. And so, yeah, we've just been learning how to get more vulnerable and transparent with each other too, because we both kind of come from very similar previous experiences with the polarity and with that twin flame kind of model.
Mm-hmm. I had something. So for those who have been following either one of us, you may have seen that we did a podcast together sometime in September. Beginning of September, we did a podcast together. We had been in touch for about a month or a month and a half at that point through Instagram, and just connecting, commenting on each other's content. And then we did the podcast, and we had to actually do 2 episodes because it was too long for one episode. And we had this instant recognition, and I don't often have this instant recognition. The last time that I had this instant recognition was with the person that I then recognized as my twin flame. And well, so because we both do this work, we're really good at recognizing people that are important on some kind of soul level without trying to judge it or label it. So we were both like, let's see what this is, and just assuming that this was going to be a very meaningful spiritual connection and friendship, past life connection. And that is kind of how we connected. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's like the same thing, like the long-term relationship I was in, we'll just say names, it doesn't matter. Her name was Tia, so we can start creating distinction with the things that we're talking about. But it was the same type of thing. It was a recognizing in that partnership of some sort of twin flame kind of mission together, blueprint. There were all these other lives together. And coming out of that, for me, it was a challenging break, but it was very beautiful and exactly what I needed. But I had kind of taken this idea of everything that I was seeing, and I kind of like had it on the back burner a little bit. And so coming into it, it was exactly like what she was saying. It was very much there's a strong relationship here. There's a strong friendship. And then in the days leading up to coming out, I started realizing that there were lives together that I was noticing where we were in partnership together and sacred union together. And so then everything kind of unfolded from there. Where do we go from that?
It was a lot of synchronicities that once we started putting the puzzle pieces together, could not be denied. I make channeled artwork, portraits, past life portraits. I'm an Akashic Records reader, but I also make portraits. And I had a portrait that I created in 2021 or 22 that was based on a past life that I had seen with my twin flame back then that I was with. And he had even given me a name and everything, the version of that other incarnation of my twin flame. And so I had this portrait, I had this name, I had all these stories. He comes to visit, I show the portrait, we talk about these past lives, all kinds of stuff, because it's just what we do. We read the Akashic Records. It's like how you talk about your football team.
Your childhood memory.
You want to see you want to know what I saw in the Akashic Records? Here's my stories of the last 5 years of past lives.
When I lived in this dimension, this shit happened to me.
So he's recognizing a lot of these stories as his past lives.
Okay, yeah. So can I come in from there?
Yes.
So she was in a relationship. She was in a partnership when we were coming together to meet up. And so I had this whole experience with my previous twin flame of connecting with her consciousness as the goddess Lakshmi, who's in the Vedas, in the Hindu mythology, and connecting with her consciousness as Mother Mary. And having all of these types of visions of the future with different blueprints and things that we were going to create together, such as dragon stories and a lot to do with sound and language and all of that. So I was coming in to meeting up with her with this experience during my twin flame relationship, where I then got divorced. And it was more perceived as like, well, I was just seeing this as a twin flame partnership and she wasn't. So I kind of had to come away from that with this feeling like, well, what was I actually seeing? What was I perceiving? Why did this feel so real? And why does it still feel so like inevitable in my life? I had another experience in between this, connecting with another person where it was kind of the same thing coming through, these same visions and these same blueprints and these same ideas. And I bring this up because it's all going to tie together, because we're going into the realm of souls in multiple bodies and clones and all of these types of things. So I'm coming into meeting up with her with this experience of feeling this twin flame connection, connecting with this energy, and leading up to leaving to come meet up with her, I started seeing these other lives where we were in a partnership, and I started connecting with that consciousness, with Lakshmi, with that partner, the true twin flame partner that felt like I was connecting with in that relationship. And so I started seeing how the lives that she was sharing with me that she thought were about this partner that she was currently with, that a lot of them were triggering my own memories, and that I was picking them up as perhaps my lives, and the portraits like she was showing me, I was seeing myself in them. And so when we got to interacting, I started receiving this feeling that I had back in this partnership, which was this complete divine connection. It's ineffable with words. You can't describe it. And it's what I would think is the essence of where the concept twin flame comes from. It's like a meeting in unity where only unity can exist. And so I started seeing this and feeling this with her as we were going through this weekend, having these conversations. And I ultimately had the realization that before I left for the weekend, that I had to tell her the part of the full depth of what I was seeing and experiencing and feeling, because in those moments, I knew that I was actually reconnecting with this consciousness that I had been connecting with in this twin flame partnership that was showing me all of this love and helping me awaken. And it was like that consciousness showed itself again. And there's all these other synchronicities that led up to it. But anyways, I ended up telling her how I felt about her before I left, and informed her that I have been seeing us as having lives together as partners. And so then the experience unfolded from there.
Yeah, and I think so we're going to be jumping back and forth in time a bit, so try to keep up. But there's no other way to explain this.
It's difficult.
Because it's such a multi-dimensional layered story. So now I'm going to first talk about how my twin flame experience was. So I met somebody in 2020 or 21, I can't remember. And we immediately connected. There was the typical twin flame stuff, the telepathy, the synchronicities, seeing the same past lives, seeing all these lifetimes in Atlantis, Lemuria, all this stuff, doing all this amazing spiritual work together in temples, doing all this stuff together, being together in the Essene community, doing all kinds of important stuff. And also dragon work together. And I had already been working with the dragons. Like, one of my Instagram handles is the Gnostic Dragon Witch. That's literally my name on Instagram. So the dragons are like the main thing in everything I do. Dragons, hypnosis with the dragons, Akashic records with the dragons, like channeling, it's dragons. Everything is dragons. So this person that I was with, his name is Nick. Some of you may know him, some of you may not know him. I wish him all the best still. Up until this day, I wish him nothing but good stuff in his life. We got together, there was this instant dragon connection with him. And I was seeing how we were gonna do all this dragon stuff together. We would be creating stuff. We actually had a spiritual magazine together for a while. And many of these creative ideas, they kind of never fully took off in the way that they could have fully taken off. And that's another synchronicity. When we started talking, all these ideas that I had seen with Nick, they came back spontaneously while talking to him, because they were ideas that he had with the images, creating these entire visual collections together of images for people that are based on Akashic records, and bringing back like true stories based on the Akashic records. Stuff like that is stuff I saw for myself when I was in this twin flame connection. And so many of these past lives. And so what happened for me is so we did a podcast together in the beginning of September, and it was after that podcast that I started feeling like, why does Rayan remind me of Nick? And it actually triggered me and made me irritated, because I didn't understand it. I said, how is he reminding me of him? They look nothing alike physically, completely different people. But it was something about his energy, and it has nothing to do with personality traits. It has nothing to do with attitude. It had purely to do with energy. And then, because this was all just long distance online, we did the podcast. Turns out he lived 5.5 hours away. He said, hey, I'm going to come visit you. I want to spend some time like just talking in real life and just hanging out. He came over, he walks up the steps, and I look at him and I'm like, oh my God, it is Nick in another body. What is happening? This was extremely confusing for me. And a few months earlier, I had received an entire download about twin flames. I had received an entire download, and I will put that in the description, this article of this podcast too, where there is a big difference between twin flames and twin rays and what the true divine union is, and that there has been kind of a deliberate infiltration of this whole twin concept to keep people in confusion and to kind of create confusion around what is a twin flame, what is a twin ray, because there's two very distinct types of connection. And then there's also purely karmic connections. Again, there is no hierarchy. There's very harmonious soulmate connections that may have very important missions together, and that is all perfectly fine. So yes.
Yeah, so the way she was describing seeing the connection between myself and Nick, that's what I started seeing immediately with the connection between her and Tia. And how when I went through this process, I went through this whole awakening of cosmic memory. I was going into these other lives and I was seeing us again as these partners, and that immediately was being shown when I connected with her. And the moment I saw her, I knew, I just felt it. I knew that it was completely true. And it was just like a complete reconnection of that energy. And actually, throughout those days when I was navigating that field of trying to figure out how to say different things and eventually tell her this conversation, we ended up having this whole telepathic experience where she was guiding me and helping me through that process. And so I say this because this is that kind of overlapping pattern that also happens with the twin flames. And it's this feeling of like connecting telepathically, but then there being something in between and there being something caught. But as we've gone through this experience, we have noticed the reflection of our ex-partners within ourselves, and it sent us down this whole kind of rabbit hole of really understanding what that actually is and what that could be. And part of that, where am I going with this?
Wherever it needs to go. But yeah, so definitely this experience in my case, because he kind of talked about how his experience was at the end and realizing that he saw all of these visions. And then it turned out like it wasn't really going the way that it was being shown to him. And that was exactly my experience. So we lived together in Spain, me and my twin flame. We lived together in Spain. We worked together. I was very public with this relationship. Those of you that are watching this, that have been following me since 2020, you will have seen him many times. And then suddenly he was gone. And I never really addressed it. I never really talked about it. But that was because I was kind of not understanding still. Like, I was shown all these things so clearly about having this like spiritual conscious business together with somebody that was really passionate about this trinity connection. All work that I bring goes through the lens of God. Like, all the things that I do, I ask God, show me what it is. What will you have me do next? Show me what it is that I need to do for those people that I have soul contracts with in this lifetime to help and to assist on their journey. And that is what I thought we were doing together, like me and my twin flame. That is the vision I had. And then I meet him and all these ideas just spontaneously in conversation, because I remember him saying, like when we were just talking that first week, and oh my god, I have all these creative ideas and I can see how you could do all this, and then he's like, oh well, if you want, of course, because I'm just saying all this and I have all these ideas. And I was thinking, this is everything that I wanted, and that was like not at all romantic at that point. It was purely about mission, the shared vision of this shared service through God, basically.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was feeling too. It was like going through this process with the marriage and the ex-partnership, and feeling like I got to a point where I was embodied in this true self living, and realizing that there needs to be a reciprocation of that, and feeling that within the connection that we had just naturally as friends and as creators together. But when it didn't take long for me to realize the level of love and divine union love that I had for her. But where I'm getting to is that we both reached these areas within our previous relationships, our twin flame relationships, of the other getting to a point of limitation. And this limitation kind of being the thing that is utilizing a spiritual habits and spiritual personality, but underneath there are still a lot of emotions, a lot of things and shadows that aren't necessarily being dealt with. And so the thing that was interesting was that with her current partnership that she was in when we met, that is something that I felt going on with her partner. I felt that there was an emotional limitation, that there were things that weren't able to necessarily be reached and embodied. And when we went about having our conversation together, and within a few days deciding that we needed to create this life together and come together, we went about that with the most respectful and mature way as possible. However, when that conversation was had on her end, there was a lot of emotional outburst that happened that is not judged. However, there was a level of hiding of the emotional kind of layers that were currently being presented in that partnership.
Yes. And I can definitely see how that experience showed me that there were imbalances in that connection, and that him and I, in a matter of days, had a level of open communication that was not at all present in that connection, despite the fact that that was a connection that I had had for almost a full year at that point. And I quickly pulled up this article. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there's a few paragraphs that I think are important to share right now. And I wrote this a year ago because this was a gigantic download that I received while I was basically in the process of separating from my twin flame. That's when I got this whole download. So I wrote that I believe there are two kinds of twin connections, and that the term twin ray and twin flame are not the same thing, is what I said here. And some people, they will be in a twin flame connection, and then when it doesn't work out, they just say no to the whole thing, and they say it's this whole new age deception, it's not true at all, it's not true. And then there are people that are in a twin flame connection that is toxic, that is not healthy after a certain time, and they stay in it because they believe so strongly in the twin flame concept that they will stay in a connection that is not meant for them to stay in. And that in this twin connection there has to be this push, pull and drama, and that is the typical twin flame connection, that if it's not like that, it's too easy, or then you're not doing it right, basically. Or a lot of people say twin flames are not karmic, when they are in fact the highest karmic connection that you can have, but that this is 100% orchestrated by God. that this is, like I said in the beginning, a sacred connection, just like any connection. So the way that I saw this is you have an awakening, and you can read it in the article. You have an awakening, so you kind of go up, and then you meet this twin flame. And not everyone, like in a video that he just shared on his Instagram, necessarily has a contract to meet twin flames. Some people can do this perfectly with different karmic partners or soulmate partners. It's all about puzzle pieces that you fit together, this round table up in heaven where you're all having a chat about, hey, how are we gonna do this? So anyway, not everyone has a contract to do these things with a twin flame. So this is deception number one. You must find this twin flame, otherwise you're failing at being spiritual. Like, no, not at all. So basically you have this awakening, then you get catapulted even further into awakening. Like in my case, it was being very traumatized by abuse. That's what triggered my awakening. Then the second catalyst was meeting my twin flame, who pushed me through deep initiations, for which I'm extremely grateful. Then you basically meet this twin flame at this X point where you meet in the middle. And that is where you basically go through all this stuff together. You trigger each other in a lot of ways. But then if one person is unable to really connect to that God frequency, then you are no longer choosing to love yourself fully as the God that you are, or as the goddess that you are, as God that came into this human body, because you're choosing the well-being of this other person over your own well-being. And in a way, by choosing yourself, despite the fact that you're supposed to be with this twin flame because that is the person for you, if you're then still able to say, this is not good for me, if it is just going in toxic cycles, and this is so, just Google twin flames, read the forums. It is full of people saying, I'm miserable. Like, they won't call me, they are blocking me, they are this, they are that are waiting for months and months, letting their spiritual journey depend on this twin flame. That is not loving yourself. So there came a point in my journey where I had to go, and I said, I cannot do this and I need to go. And that is the point that you need to get to, where you basically take back that part from yourself and integrate it within you. And that's when I truly found harmony between my inner masculine and feminine halves, and found that I could be perfectly happy within myself. And that's the point that he also had to get to, because then when you are both able to fully fulfill your own lives, and then you come together, you are not going to be transactional in how you interact with each other. You're going to give from being fulfilled. You are going to basically give from a full cup, and you're not going to take. It's a silly example, but for instance, when I walk up to him, I don't say I need a hug. I say I want to give you a hug. That is one example. I don't expect anything back. I am giving because I feel like giving a hug. That's just an example, but look at most relationships. But I digress. Back to this thing. I promise we're almost. So what happens is you have these stories about twin flames, like there's an unbreakable cord, they are your other half, this is supposed to be the relationship you're supposed to be in, you have to work through these blocks. And we're gonna get into more stuff with consciousness, and like he said, consciousness being present in multiple bodies, and what that means for connections like the twin flame, like the twin ray. So what happens, you meet this twin flame, a lot of people, they split up, and all of a sudden, I see this in a lot of my female friends that were with the twin flame, they are now doing so well on their own or with a new, more aligned partner. And they, if they would have stayed in that connection, they would have kept themselves small, dependent on another person for their own happiness. So anyway, I'll link this article in the bottom and in the description, and just, yeah.
My case was interesting too, because I was in a space where I was going through very deep initiations of awakening, and my twin flame partner was not willing to go into those spaces on her own. So I was going through a lot of really having to trust and listen to my decisions that I was making for myself within the relationship, and trust that no matter what outcome happened, I was making what was in my highest alignment. And that actually that required many situations where I had to create boundaries and say that I'm not going to make decisions based off of your fear, because there was fear and a sense of me being responsible for the other person's feelings coming around the choices that I was making when I was going through this awakening process. And so because of the consciousness blueprint that I was seeing around all of the creation, around having family and children, I was still really devoted to the relationship working out at the same time. And so what actually ended up happening was I kept making these choices that were, I knew were best for my individual self. And my twin flame partner is actually the one who ended the relationship. So she's the one who decided for us to get a divorce, and I was still devoted. And so it was that process of me really having to face this sense of not being chosen, not being, even after going through all of this work of committing myself to my highest self, to my true self, that not being good enough per se, that story running, we know that's not true. But I just say this because of the level of trust and surrender that process has taken me through. And it's not a matter of feeling like some outcome happened that was not for my best, and that I wasn't chosen, and that my choices are what caused some sort of fault or blame in this relationship. But it caused me to go through this merging again of the masculine and feminine, and realize that I was really outsourcing my feminine to validation within the relationship. And so that is a major signifier when we came together in our connection. And it was this feeling of all of the very, very positive aspects of the twin flame dynamic, but there isn't a shadow connected to it. And there is challenges that we'll go through, but to the level of karmic shadow that was within the previous dynamic, it's just not there. And I can feel it because it is a sense of trust and being received in the same level of reciprocation of trust that I have for myself. It is what I feel from her, and it's because she has that trust within herself of what she's gone through. And so there's just a very large distinction around the level of surrender and safety that is within the presence of this trinity connection rather than this dual connection, because it's not the sense of light and dark, good and bad. It's just we're back to this state of like eternal individual self, which is then able to be emanated and connected into this sacred union that we have.
Mm-hmm. And that is also how I explain it in this article, the difference between a twin flame connection and a twin ray connection. And I was getting all these downloads. So a year ago, I am Googling. I'm trying to find any clarity, and there's barely any clarity to be found online. I find one person, and her name is Jen Freer, and she was on Instagram, but she has like barely, I don't know, she has under 1,000 followers. And she writes this article that I find, and it explains everything. And it is basically confirmation of everything that I had received about twin flames and twin rays. That the twin flame will be the soul connection that is going to trigger you. It is going to basically make you really choose yourself. It is going to, because there is this very high level of recognition in the twin flame. And so you're going to see this person. You're going to recognize yourself in this person in such a way that you have never recognized anyone in your life. So you're like, oh, this is the person. Okay. And then, because you're going to be looking at this other person with this big flashlight and you're shining on this person, but because you still have karma to go through, you still have wounds to heal, you're gonna trigger each other immensely. That's what's gonna happen. But if you are not willing to both really let go of ego, because it is going to strip you of any ego that you are trying to hold on to, anything that you are resisting in releasing, it will just come up. You will not be given the choice in the twin flame connection. And often people keep going in circles and circles and circles with a twin flame. And it is when one person says, okay, if it is like a connection where it is really becoming toxic and it is not getting better, and instead of actually healing this together, you are just making this bigger and bigger, and it becomes a bigger and bigger backpack that you're carrying with you because you're staying in this connection because the internet tells you this is your twin flame. Then you are basically staying under this ceiling of your own potential. And so this article by this lady explains, if then you fully choose you, you basically take back your energy and you continue on this journey, this X. You meet them in the middle. They are a very important catalyst, and then you can move on. And then instead of going like this, because you're not looking for somebody, you are fully in union with yourself. You are going like this. And then if you meet somebody that is also going like this, you are going to be just harmonious together. And that is what she explained. That is when you will, and only then will you be able to connect with a twin ray who is your actual divine union counterpart. And that is when you will recognize each other, because you will be able to perceive this other person through the lens of God, because that is the first thing that you are always connected with. And in the twin flame connection, it is often about being triggered and triggering back. And a lot of the times it is basically a playing out of a trauma bond. You're playing out a trauma bond. A lot of the time you are playing out things that you are healing. But once all that is healed, then maybe you're not supposed to stay together. So I'm going somewhere with anyway. So that's the main difference between the twin flame and the twin ray. And I'm seeing how there is just one story on the internet and it is all kind of bunched together in one story, and it's confusing, and there are so many different things and everyone's confused when it comes to this.
And I think that's a perfect point around the potential too, because I think people stay in a twin flame dynamic because they don't believe in the potential of them actually being fully healed. And they don't believe that that's a possibility. So they're staying below that shelf of potential, which, getting specific with details, is actually the seventh dimension. So below the seventh dimension, we have 6, 5, and 4. This is the dimension of the soul, the individual soul. So that is a field of polarity. It's a large oversoul splitting itself through masculine and feminine energies into individualized aspects of itself. So if you're only holding the consciousness of you being a soul, you're not pulling yourself further in and up and down and all over to the identity of the God self. And that is the Trinity. It is the I am in, God is me. I have surrendered my personality and my ego to the Creator, and therefore I am anchored and embodied in that state. So I recognize that within another because that's all I can do. I can't not recognize it. So that feeling of the lens through God, and it only being through God, is that feeling of the Trinity, of the twin ray, because you're then moving to the upper room, the monad. You're identifying as this true self, and you're able to then recognize that and feel that within another. And that's where the unification comes in. And that's why sacred union is the underlying theme for basically everything, because you're finding sacred union within yourself, and then you're allowing that to reflect in the other. This is a podcast. It's chill. We're chilling.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we're chilling.
We're just relaxing and talking to you
So
about
we just,
what happened.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. That was me.
I don't know. Yes, continue.
So we just talked about some of our experience of coming together and how it involved seeing these other consciousness, like imprints and signatures of the other within our previous twin flame relationships. And there is a lot to unpack from that, with the concepts of clones and black magic, false light screens, and soul tracking, and family lines being tracked, and the whole 9 yards. So we're gonna leave that there, and we're gonna do a whole other episode specifically about that, unpacking all of our stuff and how it relates to those concepts. So now we're going to continue going with this trinity of sacred union, and like what that looks like when both are anchored and embodied into the trinity aspect of the name that comes up is Hyros Gamos. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
How would you explain that?
Because that is literally what they showed me when I saw an entire lifetime, when I started connecting with my twin flame. Is I saw an entire lifetime in Atlantis, where I was a very important priestess in a temple, and where I saw him as this important priest slash healer. And again, yes, the other day he's explaining to me this entire concept that he has, that he's going to start sharing about. And I said, what you just shared was exactly how I saw that one incarnation in Atlantis and the work that he was doing. And that I then related to my twin flame, that I thought was his incarnation. And again, we're going to dive deeper into how this is all possible in another episode. But in that memory, that whole lifetime, because when I see the Akashic Records, it's like a movie. They're showing me an entire movie. I started seeing all these scenes, and in really big letters, because they'll show me actual words in like bold printed letters. I saw Hyros Gamos, like the sacred union is what that means. It means like the divine soul union with God. And that's what I was being shown. And I saw how we were married in Atlantis with this gigantic crystal. And it was because I was wearing a crystal that I was meditating with, and I was getting the messages from this crystal that was the same crystal, the same type of crystal. So that's what I was being shown. It was basically coming together to share a mission in service of Mother, Father, God. And both having this mission as being the focal point of the union. It's what fuels the union. It's your connection to your divine mission, to what you're doing here in service of God. And I know there's people that don't like the word service, but it's like the word devotion. It does not mean you are putting yourself beneath God. It means you are opening up your channel completely so that you can let God work through you. And if both are doing that, then you're combining forces. You are basically then sharing this joint mission of service in Mother, Father, God, which is what all this is about, this ascension path. So that's what I was being shown, that these unions are these Heros Gamos unions, the true twin ray sacred union connections.
And when you trace this to higher dimensional living within this sacred union, and that is what we're speaking on, is being embodied in a higher dimension. However, I'm also speaking on planets and time cycles where we've been in 5th, 6th, 7th dimension. This is what that trinity is. It's the surrender into God, in God coming through that relationship. So a lot of times within this frame that we're currently ascending through, I think, again, we're taking this idea of polarity, and kind of it always stems back to power, because power is also the theme of the field of polarity. It's like strapping this kind of like power couple idea onto whatever you're creating or your perception or the way you're serving. But the surrender into Heros Gamos, is that how you say it? However, is when you're getting into this space of actually starting to really, you're becoming a portal for love, and you're becoming a portal for the divine. And so you think of in a polar function, two sides, negative and positive, coming together. When that's completely integrated, that is the root, that is the foundation that's actually coming down from the feet. So that's coming in and extending into Gaia. And so everything that's happening from there is happening in this place called the upper room, this place of this higher dimensional unity. So this is where creational blueprints come together, and it's unlocking things that we aren't even necessarily able to comprehend yet. It's the essence of what Tantra actually is. It's the dance of creative energies coming together to open up a flower of this experience for others to experience as well. And this doesn't mean that you're going to be serving others in the way that everybody else has served. It means that no matter what you're doing, because you're devoted to God and God as the relationship, that just that experience is what's serving the planet.
And we're definitely telepathically tuning in, because I was already thinking of how to work that into the conversation, and then you said it. There can be two people that are so devoted to God, that are passionate about baking bread. And I know here I go again with another modern parable, but this is just what I do. Imagine that these two people bring God into everything they bake, and together they are not constantly looking at each other like, what can I get? What are you not doing right? How can I get you to do this? They are just so passionate about this bread. They each have a type of bread, and they're just like all about this bread, and they are just so happy that they are doing this, and they're making this bread, and they're looking at this other person like, oh my God, you are just so passionate about the bread you're making. That's so awesome for you. And you are also doing the same. That is so great for you. Together, they are building this bakery that is filled with like just their passion that they are combining in this bakery, and it's the best bakery in town. So do you have to be spiritual teachers? Do you have to be making videos? No, you can be so passionate about child education that you are both bringing God into how you teach, that you start a school, a new earth school, a new type of environment for children to learn. You can be so passionate about herbal remedies, about holistic health care. You can meet somebody that is like that, and you can see through them how they are channeling God, how they are letting God work through them, because you're doing the same. So you recognize it in this other person, and together you start this whole revolution in holistic health care. You can have a hardware store. I don't know. It can be anything. And that is what the new earth is. It's not all about, it's about getting rid of illusion. It's what these golden dragons that you've heard us talk about all the time. they say, basically what they do is they burn away illusion to illuminate the truth. And that is what a true divine union will do. And that is including the twin flame connections that you first go through, and you see the divinity in those connections, and you see then the divinity in separating from those connections when you have learned from that connection what you needed to then take it into this Heros Gamos connection, where you can then, I lost my train of thought. Anyway.
You want me to just take over?
Yes.
Oh, did I lose my train of thought too?
But it was
I
good.
just had something really good. Trust that it was good. It was good. And we'll come back.
You can take it into whatever you're doing. That's the point. It is this connection of being... Yes. Okay.
I got mine. So... And the way you get there is by the conversations. And so like, just by going through what you're going through individually and then coming together and having vulnerable conversations about it, exchanging ideas, and just being transparent about the way you're feeling and about the way you're able to move through any type of conflict or any type of challenge, you're programming the ether around you with that conversation, with that vibration. And so that core and that foundation of trusting and surrendering into you being seen fully and being safe in your expression is what allows this Heros Gamos blueprint to manifest into the space through, honestly, the frequency, through the sound, and bringing in different creational aspects to the process of the dynamics between the partnership. But the emphasis on utilizing the voice and doing that from a transparent, vulnerable space is what allows the continued programming of the reality around you to be able to hold these vibrational levels to bring in more of this wisdom.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's very important also to again emphasize, does it eventually matter what label your connection has if you have the intention to have this transparent communication? Then it is sacred in that very moment, because then you are deliberately choosing to bring consciousness into your connection. So do you need to find this perfect divine counterpart? That should not be the main goal. The main goal should always be self-development, getting to know God through getting to know yourself, and you are going to always meet those people exactly that you're supposed to meet. And so in the twin flame community, there's just this emphasis on, is this my twin flame or not? Is this just a karmic partner? And when you're asking those questions, you're not anchored into this full feeling of being connected to self, so that you can just recognize that the connection that you're having with somebody is conscious, it is open, it is honest, it is transparent. And in that moment, if you can say yes to those questions, this is what I'm experiencing, then what do labels matter? Because you don't need external validation of what you know within you.
And this is where you get into being able to have command, per se, over the reality and over what you're creating together. And I think of intention in terms of having a child together, and this combined intention where when you're surrendered into God, when God is the intention, all of the choices are trusted and all of the next steps are always trusted. So even if you can't fully see, even if you can't figure out everything that's going on, you trust in your relationship with your intuition. And so you're creating trust with that other person's intuition. And so when it comes to then large things that happen like that, it becomes easier to navigate the field because you're both fully surrendered into God. And maybe, and I'm thinking of a child specifically in this example, maybe you're in a twin flame relationship and you decide to have children together, and that shows cracks and you end up splitting apart. But when you're still both connected and devoted to God, then you're going to find the ability to navigate through those experiences with a mature level. And maybe it's going to highlight areas where the other isn't as mature as you thought. But this continued devotion to the path that's in front of you, no matter what that path is, and removing all of these conditioned expectations around how things are supposed to play out, how these different dynamics are supposed to end up, and holding on to those dynamics is sometimes not allowing that flower to bloom and not allowing that flower to flourish. And souls are coming in wanting to have specific experiences. Having souls together when you're not in that divine partnership any longer, or that's not the outcome. There are so many people who are fearing this perception or this label of them from getting a divorce or from splitting from this partnership, and feeling like that means that they're then not spiritual enough, or they don't have enough understanding of themselves, and it kind of gives off this idea of being labeled as being irresponsible. But all of this is part of the path, and moving through these relationships, like we've said, of not creating a pedestal, but knowing that it's your spiral staircase. You're moving through it vibrationally, and all of that requires different dynamics and different angles to really experience and re-experience certain things that are throughout this Akashic level of time.
Mm-hmm. Again, you were already preparing for what I was now going to say. So what I'm always saying is that your soul is this big multidimensional spider web, and you're the center of the spider web. And if one thread moves, the whole web vibrates. So something that happens in one thread of the web, meaning in one incarnation, is going to have a ripple effect to the entire web. So sometimes that ripple is going to be big, then it's going to be smaller and smaller. And you're coming into this life also to shed a lot of old energy that simply cannot go with you where you are going. So what's going to happen is most spiritual people, they're not going to have this perfect life. They're going to have their initiations. And these are carefully curated initiations that your higher self orchestrated for your highest development, so that you may get to know yourself again through the initiations of God. And that does not mean being tested, because God already knows that you're going to pass these tests. It is our ego that is then thinking, are we strong enough? Can we do this? And for a lot of people, pregnancy and giving birth for women are initiations. But back to different relationships, for instance, there are also women, and men probably too, that will initiate people, that have had a lot of past lives as priestesses, where they initiated through relationship, where they initiated men through interaction, through relationship. And I know that that is one of my blueprints that I came in here with. And yeah, if I was going to judge myself and my history through the lens of what is appropriate, what is expected, then I would be like, oh, okay, this and this and this and this I could judge myself for. But if I take distance from all of that, I can see how my higher self put all these obstacles there for me to go through them, and then take from them what was an obstacle and then integrate it as a strength, so that I can become more flexible, get to know myself again on all these different sides of this prism, and just have a way broader view of who I am and what I'm capable of. And also playing out various Akashic timelines that I can now collapse. So yeah, and many of you are doing the same. So do not judge yourself for your relationship history or mistakes or whatever. In my case, being in a very toxic connection for way too long, being in an abusive relationship where my mother tried multiple times to get me out of there and it would not work. Everyone was seeing what this was except for me. I deliberately made that choice because I needed to have that lesson to really break free from that connection. Nobody could do this for me. I needed to do this for myself. So never judge yourself for any of these things because they are now contributing to who you are.
And I think we're going to get into some good topics. A lot of conversation we've seen about like political topics and abortion and women's rights and just kind of how it fits into this experience of sacred union. And we're going to we'll move through some vibrational levels here because the abortion aspect kind of becomes obsolete at a certain dimensional level once you're embodied in that state. But I'll just start. Something that I've thought about a lot is my body and my intention that I've had with my body throughout relationships and with all men, how the depth of unconscious intention contributes to, say, surprise. And I'm going to be using the child example a lot right now. Surprises, getting pregnant out of nowhere, or just really seeing how like there's this unconscious shadow aspect of the masculine, of the male body to impregnate. And to impregnate, whoa, my ear just started ringing so loud. Woo! That is the ball ear. The ball, the hierarchy of ball corresponds here, and this is perfect for this topic because it's this idea of conquering and this idea of impregnating. And from a microcosmic level, it's impregnation of vibration, of consciousness. There can be a male archetype and a male trait of really wanting to make an impression, of wanting to be charismatic and come in and make women think about you and influence them through the way that you look and these subtle body languages. And that corresponds to the feminine as well. But with the masculine, we see this history of what we're in now, of the patriarchy, and that extending into many galactic cycles that we've experienced of the masculine forces wanting to cut out and create imbalances with the feminine. And, you know, a perfect example is like Genghis Khan coming into all of these villages and areas and locations, wanting to implant that seed into many women, implant that seed into that geographic area, so then those genetics are then passed down generation to generation. And so that shadow aspect is existing within the trauma of men, within the trauma of the male body. And that consciousness is what we know of as the controlling consciousness, the service to self consciousness. So when a male is not tuned into their deepest intention, understanding their full sides of polarity, that can come into play of this idea of impregnation through an unconscious intention. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
And then we see how in this patriarchal society, a lot of the responsibility is being placed on women to make sure that they don't get pregnant because men don't have control over it. That is the story that is being passed down. And then women are also being taught that they don't have control over when they are able to receive a child and when they are not. And I'm not saying that I was born with all this knowledge. I had to learn all of this. And many women, they are just being taught that, okay, you just, whenever you have sex, you have to make sure that you do not get pregnant. When in reality, when you have a regular cycle, there are about 5 days a month where you have a chance of getting pregnant, and then there are 25 or 26 days where there's absolutely no risk. But if you are completely dissociated from your body as a woman, which we often are because it is not safe to be in your body in this world where there is constantly this threat of where you would rather just not be connected to your body. You want to be in your head, you want to be hiding, you don't even want to feel your body, and often it is connected to past lives. For women, a lot of witchcraft lifetimes, a lot of lifetimes in the Middle Ages where they were basically having to dissociate constantly. You were constantly, it was safer to not be attached to your body. So you are not going to feel what your body feels like when it is fertile. You're not going to feel what your body feels like when it is preparing for ovulation. And what this means when we look back at our ancestry is that for, let's say, in Europe, in the Middle Ages, Catholicism was very popular. It started to gain popularity. So that meant that all the wisdom of all these tribal women that were passing down all this intuitive knowledge on the female body was all demonic. All of a sudden, all of that was considered demonic. So we have not had women that have been passing down these teachings for centuries. So now we have this whole generation of conscious women that is getting refamiliarized with all of this knowledge, and they don't really have the examples. Often we have to go look at other cultures where they still kept these connections going, because in the West you can't really find examples. So we have to all figure it out on our own. And when you pass this knowledge down to young girls, then they are going to get more comfortable in their body. They're going to be more confident. They are going to recognize the energy of, also energetically, not just symptoms physically in your body. You're going to start recognizing the energetic signature of what is my energy like when I am open to receiving a child? What is my energy like when I'm closing down and preparing for when you're gonna bleed every month? You are starting to feel an energetic shift. And a lot of women are then gonna be like, oh, I feel moody or PMS. Yeah, but what's the energy? Can you pinpoint the energetic feeling of this? And you can do the opposite. You can also recognize the energetic feeling of what is it like when I am ovulating, when I'm fertile. These are all things that basically have gone lost in our society. And with the popularity of the birth control pill, that the detachment and dissociation has gotten even worse, because now you don't have to think of anything anymore, and you will be given these artificial hormones, chemicals that will just do everything for you. Your body can just, you don't even have to do anything. You don't have to listen to your body. In fact, we're going to tell your body a whole different story by giving it all these artificial chemicals. And there are people that say, if I did not have this birth control pill, I have severe PCOS, which is like really dysregulated menstrual cycles, endometriosis, which is really bad cramping, really bad pain. All these things are an energetic symptom. They're a physical symptom of an energetic cause that can always be located in the energetic field. Every physical symptom has an energetic origin. But for that to really, for us to get to the point where we are able to really look at everything that way, we have to look at healthcare in general in a completely different way. So we can't just say, oh, okay, yeah, it's that easy, just listen to your body. No, we would have to look at healthcare in a completely different way. Okay.
And I think for men, going back to like after the fall of Atlantis, going through the Middle Ages, I consider that being one of the darkest times, the Dark Ages. It was dirty. It was dark and dirty back then. And we're thinking of the male consciousness, it being programmed into the body, that like we run on survival, and that the highest thing that you can do for survival of the planet is have a child and pass on your genes. So you have all of these men running around in this time period, the Middle Ages, wanting to secure land for their house, property, and their family lines, and create an heir for the throne. And so while they're doing that, they're in a state of trauma. So that means that they have a completely open inner child that has psychic wounds, psychic tears, where all of this artificial energy, entities, demons, they're all coming in and hooking themselves into the male consciousness and the male body. So the male is then having these intentions to just pass on the family line. And I feel like this template has resurfaced for this previous like generation and kind of my generation. It's like, it became like the cool thing to get married and have a kid and move in to a house like really soon after you like graduated college or high school. Like there was this formal kind of template coming back on. And I feel like this connects in with also the twin flame being stuck in this space, because it's like this idea of you're still not fully connected into your God blueprint, because if you were, you would realize that that mechanism of survival isn't necessarily how you're going to best serve the planet. And it's about surrendering into your unique stance and your unique circumstances, which if a child is in that picture, then it's going to happen because you're surrendered and you're in trust within that. So it's this idea of like feeling like you have to get to this point, this father wound, this feeling like we didn't receive certain things from our father. So we have to be able to kind of rebalance that in some way. And that might be true for a lot of people to have children, but there's just such an unconscious programming to having that as being an ideal, having that being as a pedestal. And through that process, that's how lower vibrational souls are able to come into these family lines and choose to be incarnated. Because if there's these low vibrations, these trauma bond vibrations that are coming together, then there can be a lower vibrational soul that comes in to match with those lower vibrational bodies. So that's where you can start to get influencing from souls that are coming in that have a lot of karma, a lot of continuing density, and a lot of things to heal, because they're coming in through a channel that are these parents that have not healed their trauma and those unconscious survival bonds.
And then there's also people that will be doing their individual work, or they know that they are on a path of really getting to know themselves. And you may be one of these people. You may now be listening and thinking, well, I have kids. Does that mean that my kids are lower frequency souls or something like that? And that's also not necessarily true, because so many different stories are possible. We are living in times where there are, like, everyone wants to be here now. This is a time where so much karma can be solved, so many things can be played out right now. And because there are so many different people here, it's like the popular party, and you know everyone's going to be there. And you're like, oh my God, it's a chance to see them and them and them and them, and pick up this conversation from there and there, like all these things. And so what you can also have is that you are deliberately going to have very high frequency souls that are choosing to come down in very karmic connections with parents that they have a whole lot of stuff to solve with siblings that they have a whole lot of stuff to solve with. They are coming in, and probably many of the people watching, they're going to be like, I feel like I came into this family and it was just all darkness. A lot of these souls are also here. So does that mean that you were not supposed to be having these kids if it's not in this divine union? It does not at all mean that, because I have 2 kids and they were absolutely supposed to be here. My soul and their souls absolutely orchestrated this whole thing. Does that mean that now things are not complicated? Things are most definitely complicated between me and my 2 kids, and I love them both very much. And I also recognize the very high frequency souls that they are, and that they have chosen to do a whole bunch of important work here on a soul level. And as much as my ego wants to keep my children from ever having to experience difficulties in their life, and if you have kids, you don't want your kids to ever have to go through the difficulties that our ego perceives as being obstacles. But on a soul level, you can recognize the divinity in them and see the strength that they have inside of them to do all the things that they chose to do. And then it is important to see everything through the lens of God again.
Always. And I think that like the situation and the vibration of the circumstance that the child is born in is very much an indicator of the vibration that they're coming in to experience. But that doesn't mean that they're automatically this low vibrational soul that can't handle it. And so it's like there's many souls, like she said, that have karma. Souls have karma, and karma is heavy, karma is dense. And so I think this just goes into the conversation about abortion, because we have pretty much the same thoughts exactly about it. And it's around this idea of like needing to stop something that's happening, such as having a child, having to go through a process of removing that potential from the field that you're in, rather than realizing that you're in a choice that could have benefit from allowing it to come through when you're surrendering into the lens of God. And so it gets extremely nuanced, but we want to bring that in for the first time that we're both talking about this and releasing it publicly. So go easy on us, please.
Because of my work in the Akashic Records, I have had a handful of people that reached out while they were pregnant that wanted me to look into the soul contracts of them and this unborn child. Some of them were not that far along yet and were considering the option of not going through with the pregnancy. And that's a big burden to put on me. And I was like, you cannot let this decision depend on what I'm going to say. So this was constantly a back and forth conversation with this one specific person that I'm talking about now. And she was a single mother already. We're the same age. She was 38. She had an 11-year-old daughter already. She was single. She was living on benefits. She did not have a lot of money. She was with a guy, and it was like this ping pong situation. They were not really going to last, like you could tell. And so she's pregnant all of a sudden, and she felt like, I don't know what to do. Logically, this is not the ideal situation. This financially, I cannot do this. I cannot do this, like all these obstacles, perceived obstacles. And a part of her was still like, but I don't know what to do. She said, can you look at what this is? And I could see how this child was so excited about choosing her as a mother. So she could clearly see what the mother could not see yet at that point, because she was so attached to her external environment. And it was kind of blocking her from seeing the bigger picture. And so I went back and forth with her for a couple of weeks. She eventually decided, I'm not going to have an abortion. I'm going to go through with the pregnancy. Her and the dad did not last. But right now, she is starting up her own business. She has both her kids, because she also had the daughter who's not always with her. And she's very happy that she went through with it, because she said, like, I'm so glad that I did this. This was an initiation for me. And this is only the beginning of their journey. because this child clearly had a specific energetic signature that was necessary in this whole spectrum that was her family, her daughter, her, and this baby. So this baby came to bring a very specific energy. And of course, everyone has free will. If she would have said, I cannot do this, I'm not going to do this. There is a book and it's titled Spirit Babies. I can't remember who the author is, Robert something, I can't remember, but he deals with these cases all the time. And he literally says a lot of babies that when you choose an abortion, they are always going to understand your decision, but they are gonna perhaps rewrite some stuff in the soul contract and they may find another way to come back. So a lot of women also feel like, I had an abortion, and I've seen this too in the Akashic records. People who have had miscarriages or abortions and they feel this tremendous guilt. A lot of the time these children come back and they actually get pregnant and it's the same soul. So that happens a lot because these souls are extremely determined to actually come back.
Yeah. And it's like, it's going to be the same decision-making process no matter what, I kind of want to go into like two experiences here of like someone who's realizing they're pregnant and going through with having it or having an abortion, because it's like coming down to the intention. And so it's like you're always going to want to be connecting with the truth of what God is and how that choice manifests through you with that situation and that experience. But having all of the dimensional awareness to make that choice is what we're missing. We don't understand the education of when a soul comes fully into the body and how this process is working. What she just mentioned, the soul actually communicating with the parents ahead of time. And so there are all these things that are used and manipulated within this field of abortion to perpetuate really dark systems that we'll eventually get a little bit into around human trafficking and different things like that. But there's also this perpetuation of guilt and of this emotional loosh that is given and projected through our feeling of the 10 Commandments of thou shalt not kill. And so we're holding on to this religious aspect of good and evil, and we're using that as a measurement of someone being good or bad. And we're placing this idea that someone is killing someone or murdering someone throughout all of the different processes and all of the different time zones that have to do with the entire process of having a child. And so this is where it gets really nuanced because there has to be free will involved. If a woman wants to make the choice of getting an abortion, she has to be able to make that choice. Like, we can't stop people from making these choices, but the goal is to create education on how that connection is happening with the soul and how we're identifying the intention of what is actually behind the choice. Because, well, someone could think they're getting an abortion because it's best for the child. They're actually just projecting this sense of like, what am I looking for? They're projecting this sense of feeling like they'd be a bad parent or feeling this sense of abandonment from their parents onto the situation. So then they don't want that to happen. So then they're feeling like they want to get an abortion. Well, really it's their fear behind them that's creating this sense of push and pull, of kind of creating these conditions around God and around what the honoring of free will actually looks like. Because when we're rooted in the heart, we're honoring all free will. Well, at the same time, we're aligning as much as we can to the will of God. So in order to align to that, we have to understand more information as well, which is around the process of pregnancy and around the process of the soul coming into the body and how long that time frame is. Because now we're getting into places where it's like there are laws being passed to allow abortion up to 6 months, right? Is that what you said? 6 months.
24 weeks.
24 weeks. So it's like we have to be able to have a very serious conversation about this and bring in these dimensional levels of, is the soul in the body there? Is that actually a cutoff point that is proper to allow? Or is there, and so then it gets into all these nuanced layers. And so what's coming up for you now?
And then again, I'm just going to repeat what I said earlier. If we look at one thing, at like women are detached from their body, then how can you be attached to the body that's growing inside of you and to the soul that is connected to that body? When we go look at ancient mystery school teachings, when we look at the Essene community, that is the community that Jesus was born into, the community where Mother Mary was a priestess. And these women were highly trained in conscious conception. They were highly trained in spirit baby communication. So when they say the Archangel Gabriel came to Mother Mary and announced the pregnancy, she already knew because they were consciously conceiving all these children. Her mother, Grandmother Anna, consciously conceiving all these children to create this network for Jesus to later be born into. So Mother Mary knew exactly what she was doing. She knew exactly that she was going to birth Yeshua, Jesus. So now we have a lot of women that are again starting to get refamiliarized with conscious conception, with communicating with spirit babies. And I know several of them that are spiritual doulas, that are now guiding women in connecting with the spirit babies that are already in their field, because the soul contracts are already made. So in a lot of people's readings, I will be able to see, okay, yeah, there are this many spirit babies that are willing to come through your birth portal, basically. So the souls are already present. The way that I have received it, because I've been through 2 pregnancies, and the second one was the most conscious, because that's when I was really doing all this work. This child came and announced itself weeks before I conceived him and said, I will be your son, and gave me this whole explanation. And then on the exact moment when he was conceived, I instantly knew that this was what happened. And then I did the pregnancy test, and I was instantly in communication with his soul. And as the months progressed, we were actively in communication, and I was starting to become aware of when he would be in his body and then be gone again. And the way that I have perceived it in my own experience, and when you go and not read the theory, you go talk to conscious women that have been pregnant, you go talk to women that are on a spiritual journey, that have had babies and have gone through the pregnancy process in a conscious way, they will all tell you the same thing. They could feel when their soul was merging with the soul of the baby inside of them, and in the beginning it is here and there. And the more that the months progress and the weeks progress, you're going to feel this baby is going to start to really live in the body. It's going to start to become used to this body. And then eventually, like 24 weeks pregnancy is 6 months pregnant. This baby is in this body. This baby is fully experiencing what it is like to be in the womb. It is fully preparing. It is fully getting used to the senses, to the body, to hearing, to seeing, to all these things. And it's still very vague. But that is what this baby is doing in these last couple of months. And once there's a heartbeat, which they can detect pretty early on, that is when the soul is definitely coming in and out of the body. And especially once the baby starts to get very active, that is when this baby is fully grounding into this body, getting used to being there. And sometimes there will be longer phases where you don't feel this baby. It's like, oh my God. And I would tune in to the baby's soul. And he's like, I'm preparing stuff. I'm here. It's fine. I'm taking care of all these things that need to be prepared before I am born, basically. And with my daughter, which was the pregnancy where I was kind of already aware, but I was not consciously planning with this baby. That's not what I was doing with her as much as I was doing it with my son. And I did a meditation when I was, I think, maybe 6 weeks pregnant. So that is a month and a half. That is like 2 weeks after you do a test and it's positive. And I did a meditation. And it was a pregnancy meditation where you connect your chakras to the chakras of the baby. And they go through all the chakras, and we connect to the heart chakra, and I start crying uncontrollably, crying. And it's because I could suddenly feel her soul, and she was inside of me, and she was talking to me. And that exact energetic signature is exactly how she is now, in her 10-year-old body right now. That is exactly the same soul. So I could feel her at 6 weeks. So, of course, now we live in a world where it is not widely accepted yet that we have a soul, that like there's a lot of people that just feel we're this meat suit, we die, that's it, we're done. So there is a lot of controversy around abortion. And first we need to bring consciousness back into everyday being so that it can be understood and experienced and embodied. And then it will naturally like have an effect on this whole abortion discussion on pregnancy, conscious pregnancy, giving birth in the hospital or not in the hospital, which is a whole conversation I can talk about for another couple of hours, which I may do on another episode. So yeah,
and it's all connected into the entire societal system, because the way we teach children about sex and the relationship with it, it's all disassociating from the body and creating fear and control. And so it's all like kind of a unified system that has to connect in with our bodies being the center point, our bodies being the temple, where we're then in a sacred union with our trinity consciousness, and that is expanding out into everything that we're doing. And this is the trinity aspect too. I've seen how with the creation of the body in the womb and the soul coming in and out, that it's this process outside of time where the higher selves, the oversouls of the mother, the father, and the child are all coming together, and they're like doing this like energetic creation all together as this trinity within the womb. And so it's all like an intention that's being merged together from these kind of 3 different angles. And so as the soul is then coming in and out of the body to like test the vibrational level and the occupancy, it's working with the mother to bring up specific things in the body and to bring up specific memories and feelings and purging and all of these different things. And so when you're moving from the space of moving into a conscious birth, that's where you're able to start working with, again, these other dimensional levels of these things. And it's not just like this process where things are happening. Like it's a process, it's a completely alchemical process that is happening throughout the entire time. And all of the functions of the body are results of the soul manifesting more into its body itself.
Mm-hmm. And again, just like many other aspects of modern medicine, what has happened is that they have taken away our power to control the process. So often now, this is getting better. When you find out that you are pregnant, you immediately think, I need to now find all the experts that are going to tell me what I have to do with my body, because I don't know how to be pregnant. I don't know how to give birth. When before there was such a thing as an OBGYN and gynecology, it was all midwives. Midwives were the ones that would guide you through your pregnancy, that would teach you, that would remind you of how your body worked. And look at just modern media, look at movies. It has all been turned into a big theatrical event. When you see we see women in movies and that are giving birth, it's all very dramatic, when that is not the reality of things. Your body knows exactly how to give birth. Your body knows exactly when it is not being interrupted, when there are no interruptions. Your body knows exactly what to do. But we have been so programmed to believe that we need external figures. And again, the same thing like with the periods. What if I have complications? What if I have this? A lot of complications are the result of a snowball effect of interventions done by medical people that have no business being present in a birthing room in the first place. There should not be any doctors. If the pregnancy is healthy, then there is no need for a doctor that tells you how you have to give birth, because often their interventions are going to make the mother's cortisol levels rise, stress hormones, what means it's going to slow down labor, which is going to distress the baby. Then they are going to start administering Pitocin, which is an artificial form of oxytocin, which the mother naturally makes in her body when she is giving birth, which means contractions are going to be way harder with the administration of Pitocin, which means there's going to have to be another intervention, which means they're going to have to add more Pitocin, which means eventually it leads to a cesarean, to a C-section. All of these things can be avoided. And I really, I know I'm getting, I would suggest, if you are wanting to understand the hijacking of the birthing process by doctors that have really no business, because that's the word, being present in a birthing room, then check out The Business of Being Born. This is the name of the documentary, The Business of Being Born. It explains all about how this is actually a business. And it's an entire thing that got started in the 50s with the rise of gynecology, and they needed to give all these doctors jobs. So what they did is they took the midwife out of the birthing room and they put male doctors there with their scalpels, with their techniques, with their medicine, and they completely changed how women give birth. So check that out. And when you see the energetics of the trauma that takes place in a hospital room, I do hypnosis sessions too with people. I've taken several people back to their moment of being born, and they are deeply traumatized by the birth experience. They are traumatized, and they literally dissociate instantly from their human baby body because it is such a traumatic experience. So imagine that being your first experience, being born onto this planet, and it is instant trauma. It is an overloading of your nervous system that is very sensitive because you were just in this womb. You are being born under stressful circumstances, exposed to sounds, noises, people, smells that should not be there at all when you come out of this womb. All of that is going to leave an energetic effect on you that you are then carrying with you, and it's going to influence all of your attachment styles to people, how you attach to your mother, how you attach to the people around you. Attachment styles are often formed in the first 7 years of your life. And when they immediately take this baby, they go wait, they do all this stuff with it. This is a chemical reaction that basically, it's an obstacle that they place in this natural chemical connection that is supposed to be formed between a mother and child within the first hour after being born. And often they deliberately interrupt this entire process, creating a whole bunch of complications that can have lasting effects on the bond between a baby and a mother. So these are all things that I have seen through my own process that are influencing a bunch of personality disorders, mental problems that people have that I'm seeing in hypnosis are going way back to the womb and how we experience our pregnancies and the delivery of our babies. Okay.
And within that, I mean, it's basically on what she just said, but the people who are around you when you're giving birth, the people who are influencing the vibration, it's imprinting that within the first 5 minutes of the baby being in this physical reality. And there used to be so many different ways of utilizing that for positivity. There would be, you know, lots of or like a handful of like high priestesses who were anchored into Sophia Christ and Sophia Christ priestesses, and they would all, you know, they would all hold the baby within the first hour of it being born or first 10 minutes, and it would imprint all of these different angles of divine feminine consciousness. And they used to be birthing with dolphins in Atlantis and Lemuria, because dolphins are specifically here to help us birth. And then we've all heard the concept of conceiving with light and the Mother Mary story. And that is the dimensional experience when you're moving up into this trinity of sacred union. Eventually, there are going to be partnerships conceiving with light. And there's going to be all of these new types of procedures and all of these new practices. And that's only possible from this connection in with the body and in with the self. And that connection in with the body is where eventually this concept of abortion becomes obsolete. Because if you're connected into the surrender with God, into the intention, then you're completely in command of that intention. And so whatever is happening, whatever is coming through, you're surrendering into that and allowing it to manifest. And because you've gotten to a vibrational level where you're surrendered with God, you're not opening up your mental field for all of these possibilities to come in that are outside of what you know is best for your highest alignment. And that's one of the biggest issues, is we're programmed with all this fear, we're programmed with all of these what ifs, and we hold the idea that we can actually be overpowered to have something come into our reality and put something in there and influence us that is not what's best for us. And that's what creates these timelines of lower vibration, of creating a non-acceptance, of a control of these situations. And so the goal with all of this is vibrational alignment and intentional alignment into the surrender with God.
Is there more that we need to add?
I don't know. That seems pretty full.
Yep. I feel like that is pretty good. Because you watching this, you may have questions that come up after hearing all of this. We are more than happy to dive into any questions and keep on talking about these topics and keep this conversation going so that we can offer as complete a view of this entire crystal as possible, because now we have given you some of these sides of the crystal, and you may show us other sides that we have not really gone into detail on, that we can still go deeper into.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
And we now have offerings between us two of one-on-one sessions, group sessions, partnership couples sessions, and specific containers that we've created that have to do with opening up the Dragon Codex and integrating into these sacred union templates and blueprints that we're talking about. So yeah, when this comes out, if you're listening to this, we now have this available at the link in both of our bios.
Yep.
Lots of cool stuff too. We're going to do drawings together and monadic paintings that we'll make together. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, and if you have been following him and you are new to me, then I definitely invite you to reach out if you have any questions. If you've been following me and now you're getting to know him and you're curious, reach out if you have any questions.
Definitely.
So yeah.
Cheers to episode number 1, and thank you to Chandra for guiding us throughout this process.
And to the golden dragons that are always guiding us.
To the golden dragons.
Yep.